Okay, so we have finished chapter 1 of The Call of the Wild, and we're now working on preparing to be able to write a text-dependent analysis or a literary analysis. In theory, all literary analyses should be text-dependent because you should really rely on a text to try to explain any analysis that you're making. So we should consider those two things from here on out the same. If you hear text-dependent or if you hear literary analysis, you still need to use the text to be able to respond to it appropriately. So we're not actually going to be doing the full-on essay yet, but I do want you to take a look for a moment with me the text-dependent analysis rubric, that when we do finally finalize one of the number of essays that we are going to plan and pre-write, you'll know how you should format those and into what depth you should go to be able to do a good job on those. So let's take a look at this rubric. As most, if not all of our rubrics, it's based on the 4-point scale. That's the easiest for us. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4 is advanced, 3 proficient, 2 basic, 1 below. And there's always a note that you should rewrite any section or any area of which that you do not score well on, and you can come see me to be able to do that. You should see me to be able to conference so you can actually get some help with that, because obviously if you're receiving a 1 or a 2, it's because you need to improve. And you may also rewrite if you receive less than 80%. So let's take a look at the categories of our rubric. First and foremost, our categories are content, which involves several things: focus and organization, style, and conventions. Those are similar to things that you'll notice on the PSSA rubrics and things like that, because those are common categories. But then I have the categories broken up into the standards and more specifically the I can statements that align with the standards. So the first one is, I can analyze how particular lines of dialogue or incidents in a story or drama propel the action, reveal aspects of a character, or provoke a decision. If we're analyzing, for example, in our first prompt, how the exposition in Chapter 1 helps develop the theme, we want to look at particular lines of dialogue or incidents that are going to help create the theme of adversity in the exposition. So that will definitely propel action, reveal aspects of a character, or provoke decisions that they'll make that'll impact them later on. So to get a 4, which is what we want to aim for, you need a thorough analysis of explicit and implicit meanings. That sounds really weird, but those mean what the text says exactly, and these are the things that we interpret to be able to support your claims, opinions, ideas, and/or inferences. This wording is kind of vague to be able to use the same rubric for multiple different prompts, but it'll work for any of them. A 3 gets you you have to have a clear analysis of those explicit, the things that are directly stated, and implicit, the things that we imply or inference from a text, to be able to support the claims, opinions, ideas, and inferences. We're not going to look at 2s and 1s because I know we're not going to try for those. I can cite the textual evidence that most strongly supports. That right there is extremely important, because you may cite a ton of different evidence, but if it has nothing to do with actually making your point, you're not going to get the points here. So you need to make sure that the evidence most strongly supports the analysis of what the text says, either explicitly or, like it says up here, implicitly, which would be inferences, conclusions, and/or generalizations that are drawn from the text. To try to give you an example of how you could do that, For a 4, we want substantial, accurate, and direct references to the text that use relevant key details, examples, quotes, facts, and/or definitions. Again, not all of those. There's an or and or there to show you that any grouping of those could be sufficient depending on the prompt. Substantial references to the main ideas and relevant key details of the text to support the writer's purpose. We are always looking at author's purpose. So that's how you get a 4 in that category. To get a 3, we look at the difference. There's really not too much that's different here, other than it's sufficient versus substantial. These are the things that bring us insight. If something is sufficient, we'll say, oh, okay, I can see what they meant there, but it's going to be more, you're going to be pointing out things that are easier to see, as opposed to things that are more in-depth analysis. So you're going to be doing more explicit analyses, as opposed to here, you're going to be definitely doing more inferencing. So to get the 3 versus the 4, you're doing a less inferencing, whereas here you're doing more inferencing. This one I don't have filled in for this because it doesn't actually matter. So you'll notice that depending on the prompt, this may or may not be filled in, because it's there in case I want to use it, but it's not a required portion here. So you'll see reflected in the final total that this one doesn't count, because we don't have 2 different texts that we're comparing at this particular point. Now, you could argue when we do a film to text comparison that we could use this one, and I might, because the film and the text would obviously have different structures. But just evaluating the exposition doesn't require this. I can analyze the influence of words and phrases in a text, including figurative and connotative meanings, and how they shape meaning and tone. Big words, figurative language, we already have pointed out a bunch of foreshadowing, some personification, some simile, and then we've talked about connotative meanings. And remember, we talked about how denotative meanings are like the dictionary definitions, and connotative meanings are the things that are not officially definitions, but they are the words and the thoughts that we associate with words. So rather than just the explicit information, we're going into, this will go into inferencing as well, because you are figuring out, okay, well, yes, these words literally mean one thing, but here's how you could also interpret them. And that will get you these points. So you would have a thorough analysis of explicit and implicit meanings. So you'd point out, well, it says this, but it can be interpreted as this. Clear analysis, the difference here is that you're not being as thorough. You're going to miss a few things that might be deemed significant, but you still did a really good job of analyzing what you did choose to analyze. Then we move on to focus and organization, and this is broken up into several points. The first is, I can identify and introduce my response to the prompt clearly, including a preview of what is to follow. So if your introduction is strong and effective, you, depending on the particular prompt, you would have your thesis statement there. That's going to be effective. If it's clear, but it's not necessarily a very strong thesis, or the introduction is a little bit confusing, not well organized, you'll get a 3. When we see I can organize ideas, concepts, and information using strategies such as different text structures to support the purpose, we're talking about not just the organization of a particular paragraph, but we're talking about the organization of the entire essay. So, did you indent your paragraphs? Did you use multiple paragraphs for various points? Are the paragraphs fitting, as in, do they make sense logically? Is an entire idea or concept evaluated in one particular section or in a series of paragraphs before you move on to another idea? Or do you jump back and forth? If you have a really good, strong organizational structure, you're going to get the 4. It's very easy to get the 4. However, some people end up getting the 3 if they fail to do things such as indent their paragraphs, or if they don't remember to include their thesis statement and remind their reader of it between the different paragraphs. Little key things like that move you from doing a pretty good job to excelling at your organizational structure. Finally, under focus and organization, did you actually have a concluding statement or section? We're really going for the concluding section in any type of analysis essay. So you want to make sure that you have a dedicated paragraph to tying all the ideas together and bringing them back to explain once again how they prove that your idea, your thesis, your analysis is justified or can be proven true. So similar to the introduction, you need to have an effective conclusion. So you're not just going to say, and those are my main points. That's not effective at all. You're going to leave your reader thinking about your inferencing, your analysis. If you just provide a clear tie at the end that all of these things together can easily show how the exposition helps develop the theme of overcoming adversity. That's kind of but that could get you a 3. When we come to look at style, it's I can write with an awareness of the stylistic aspects of composition. Well, I want you to know what those are. We use formal style, no slang, and unless you are doing a reflective piece, there's no I, me, my, I think, I feel, I believe, in my opinion. Those are not acceptable in an analysis. You don't need to tell me that you think, feel, believe, or something is your opinion because you chose to write it down. Therefore, I know you think, feel, believe it, and it's your opinion. So you avoid that. Instead of saying, I think the exposition helps develop the theme by blah, 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 you could simply say, the exposition of The Call of the Wild helps develop the theme of overcoming adversity because it sets the stage for blah, 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 blah. Your writing will be stronger if you avoid those I statements in formal writing. Instead of saying that it's something that you think, you are making it a claim. You're stating it as though it is to be believed. And we want to do that as writers. I don't want you to directly address the audience. Don't say you. You this, you that. You can reference the reader, but not you. So we want to maintain third-person point of view. Again, unless there is some strange prompt that you would get in the future where you're asked to do a reflection. Highly unusual in any form of analysis, at least literary analysis. You want to use a consistent tense, not tents like we're camping, but tense as in our verb tense. Past tense. Many of you have a habit of switching between past and present. It's distracting. So we want to maintain past tense. And I mentioned this before, but that formal style means we avoid slang terms, no text talk. We write out every word that we want to say. So if you can do that effectively, all the words that you use are used well. You use domain-specific vocabulary. That means when we talk about something like, personification, you use personification as the word, instead of saying, well, they're being given the characteristics of humans. Use the word. It's your showing that you know your academic vocabulary. Here you're using language well, but to get a 3 versus a 4, there are some things that are not necessarily the best word choice to explain what you mean. And in any analysis, you really need to do a good job of explaining what you want the reader to know, because we can't assume that they will make the same connections that we do. Any claim that you make should always be followed by a because, and here's how. Not just the because, but the here's how. The how and the why will make your writing go from just stating claims to being immensely insightful to any audience. So I want to see you do that. Finally, the category of conventions. You must be able, especially if we let you type something, use proper grammar, word usage, capitalization, punctuation, and spelling. Now, pay attention to this, because this is how I grade any conventions type of assignment. Few, meaning 1 to 3 errors, are present in sentence formation, grammar, usage, spelling, capitalization, and punctuation. And the errors, any of those 3 that are present, do not interfere with meaning. So if you use the wrong there, T-H-E-I-R instead of T-H-E-R-E or T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E, that does interfere with meaning. So you're automatically out of this category if your word usage interferes with meaning. Proofread. Did you use the right word? To get a 3, you can have up to 8 errors, and up to 3 of them can theoretically interfere with meaning. When you tally those up, that adds up to 32 points. If we were also comparing and contrasting 2 or more texts, that would make it out of 36 points. And I tend to actually leave feedback directly on the writing itself, but if I want to leave you with some next steps or overall thoughts, I'll also add some of those here. But you're going to want to check your particular piece of writing for on-the-spot feedback, is what I like to call it. So then I can actually point out specifically an area where you either did something really well and why it worked well, or where I can provide you a specific example of an area where you need improvement and how to improve that. So now you have the TDA rubric explained, and so anytime we are even doing just pre-writing for an essay, even if we don't plan at the present time to turn it into an essay, we still want to keep this analysis at the forefront of our minds, because our goal is to become excellent writers, to be able to analyze extremely well. And using this as a guide for that, along with the 3 guiding questions that we've had in class, as we've read, will enable you to do an excellent job analyzing. Thanks for listening, guys and girls.